Chapter 1, The Edge of Yesterday. The neon glow of Shinjuku painted the Tokyo night in electric hues. But for Yuri Santo, perched precariously on the rooftop railing of her high school, the vibrant city below felt distant and meaningless. Each glittering light seemed to mock the darkness she felt inside. Her life, as a 16-year-old, felt like a tangled mess of expectations, loneliness, and a crushing weight she didn't know how to carry anymore. A sigh escaped her lips, a silent farewell to a world that felt indifferent to her pain. She closed her eyes, the cool night air a stark contrast to the burning turmoil within. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" A voice, sudden and sharp, sliced through the night. Yuri flinched, her eyes snapping open. A boy stood a few feet away, his silhouette framed by the distant city lights. He looked to be her age, with messy dark hair and eyes that held a surprising amount of concern. "It's none of your business," Yuri mumbled, turning away. "None of my business?" the boy scoffed, taking a step closer. "You're about to jump off a building. I think that makes it everyone's business. Why do you even care?" Yuri retorted, her voice laced with bitterness. "Just leave me alone." "Because?" The boy hesitated, then said firmly, "Because no one should feel like this is their only option." He took another step, and Yuri instinctively backed away, her foot slipping slightly on the edge. A gasp escaped her lips as she lost her balance. For a terrifying moment, she felt nothing but empty air. Then, strong hands grabbed her arm, pulling her back with surprising force. She stumbled, landing hard on the rough rooftop, her heart pounding in her chest. The boy, whose name she didn't know, was breathing heavily, his grip still tight on her arm. Their eyes met, his filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. "You could have died," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Yuri pulled her arm away, a strange mix of anger and shame washing over her. "Why didn't you just let me?" she whispered, the words barely audible. The boy looked at her, his gaze intense. Because there has to be something better than this, right?" A long silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. Yuri looked away, unable to meet his earnest gaze. The encounter had shaken her, the boy's unexpected intervention a jarring disruption to her despair. Finally, the boy spoke again, his voice softer this time. "My name is Haruto Nakamura. What's yours?" Yuri hesitated for a moment before answering, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Yuri Santo." Haruto nodded slowly. "Yuri. You don't have to do this. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone." His words, though simple, held a weight that resonated within her. For the first time that night, a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in the darkness of Yuri's heart. Chapter 2, An Unplanned Escape. The silence stretched between Yuri and Haruto, thick with unspoken emotions and the lingering tension of what had almost happened. The neon lights below pulsed like a distant heartbeat, a reminder of the life Yuri had been so ready to leave behind. Haruto broke the silence. "So, Yuri," he began hesitantly, "why were you up here?" Yuri avoided his gaze, picking at a loose thread on her school uniform skirt. "It doesn't matter." "It does to me," Haruto said gently. "You were about to, well, you know. And I stopped you. I kind of feel like I deserve to know why." Yuri finally looked up, her eyes filled with a sadness that seemed too heavy for someone her age. "My life, it just feels pointless. Like I don't fit in anywhere. Everyone expects things from me, and I can't." Haruto nodded slowly, his expression understanding. "I get that," he said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like you're trapped, right?" Yuri looked surprised. "You feel that way too?" A small, almost sad smile touched Haruto's lips. "Yeah. More than I'd like to admit." He looked out at the city. "My home, it's not really a home. It's more like a place I have to be. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of rules." They sat in silence for a few moments, a strange sense of understanding growing between them. Two strangers, brought together on the edge of despair, finding a shared feeling of being lost. Then, Haruto did something unexpected. He stood up and walked to the edge of the roof, looking out at the sprawling cityscape. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "if everything feels so wrong here, what if we just left?" Yuri stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Left? What do you mean?" "Ran away," Haruto said, turning back to her, a spark of something almost like excitement in his eyes. "Just go. Start over somewhere new. Somewhere where no one knows us, no one has expectations." The idea was crazy, impulsive, and utterly terrifying. But as Yuri looked at Haruto's hopeful face, a tiny flicker of possibility ignited within her. The thought of escaping the suffocating weight of her current life was suddenly appealing. "But, where would we go?" "We don't have any money or anything," Yuri said, the reality of his suggestion hitting her. Haruto shrugged. "We'll figure it out. We can work, find places to sleep, people do it all the time, right? It'll be an adventure. Scary, maybe, but an adventure." He held out his hand to her. "Come on, Yuri. What do you say? Do you want to choose a different path?" Yuri looked at his hand, then back at the city lights, which now seemed to hold a hint of promise instead of just mocking her. She thought of her empty room, the constant pressure, the feeling of being trapped. And then she looked at Haruto, a stranger who had stopped her from making a terrible mistake and was now offering her a chance, however uncertain, at something new. Slowly, hesitantly, Yuri reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Okay," she said, a small, shaky smile touching her lips. "Let's go." And just like that, under the vast, indifferent sky of Tokyo, Yuri Santo and Haruto Nakamura began their unplanned escape. Chapter 3, First Steps into the Unknown. Leaving the school rooftop felt like stepping off another kind of ledge, one leading into complete uncertainty. The familiar streets of their neighborhood, usually a source of mundane routine, now seemed alien under the cloak of night. "Where should we even go?" Yuri asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Haruto, though he had initiated the escape, looked just as unsure. He scratched the back of his head. Away from here?" He gestured vaguely towards the train station. "Maybe we can hop on a late-night train to somewhere we've never been." They walked in silence for a while, the only sound their footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalks. A nervous energy buzzed between them. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Reaching the train station, they huddled in a quiet corner, trying to look inconspicuous. Haruto nervously checked his pockets. "I have about 5,000 yen, he said, pulling out a small crumpled bill and some coins. "It's not much." Yuri bit her lip. She had even less. "Maybe we can try to get some part-time work somewhere?" Late-night train pulled into the station. Haruto made a quick decision. "Let's just get on this one. Anywhere is better than staying here right now." They slipped onto the almost empty train just as the doors were closing. They sat in silence, watching the city lights blur past the window. A sense of nervous excitement filled the air. They were finally free, but the reality of their situation was starting to sink in. They had no plan, no money, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. The next few days were a blur of cheap convenience store meals, trying to sleep in parks or quiet corners, and constantly looking over their shoulders. They learned quickly how to make their small amount of money stretch. They also learned to rely on each other. Haruto was surprisingly resourceful, good at finding their next meal or a slightly less uncomfortable place to rest. Yuri, who had always felt so lost and helpless, discovered a newfound strength in her determination to keep going. One afternoon, while resting in a small park, a group of older teenagers approached them. They looked rough, and Yuri instinctively felt a surge of fear. "Hey, look what we have here," one of them sneered, looking them up and down. "Runaways?" Before Yuri or Haruto could react, the teenagers surrounded them, demanding money. Haruto tried to stand his ground, but he was outnumbered. Just as things were about to get really scary, a booming voice interrupted them. "Oi! Leave those kids alone." A tall, imposing woman with bright pink hair and several piercings strode towards them. The group of teenagers hesitated, then mumbled something and quickly dispersed. The woman turned to Yuri and Haruto, her expression softening. "You two okay?" They nodded, still a little shaken. "You look like you're having a rough time," she said, her eyes kind. "Are you on your own?" Hesitantly, they explained their situation. The woman listened patiently, her expression thoughtful. "My name is Hannah," she said when they had finished. "I run a small food stall nearby. You two look like you could use a decent meal and a place to rest for a bit. How about you come with me?" Yuri and Haruto exchanged grateful glances. This was the first act of kindness they had encountered since leaving home. They readily accepted Hannah's offer, a small glimmer of hope sparking in their uncertain journey. Chapter 4: A Moment of Kindness. Hannah's food stall was a small, brightly lit oasis tucked away in a bustling side street. The aroma of sizzling meat and savory spices filled the air, making Yuri's stomach rumble. Hannah bustled around, offering them warm bowls of delicious-smelling noodles and gesturing to a couple of stools tucked in a corner. "Eat up," she said with a warm smile. "You both look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." Yuri and Haruto didn't need to be told twice. They ate quickly, the warmth of the food spreading through them, chasing away some of the chill and anxiety they had been carrying. As they ate, Hannah told them a little about herself. She had been on her own for a while when she was younger and understood what it was like to feel lost and scared. She didn't pry too much into their reasons for leaving home, but her kind eyes told them she cared. After they had finished eating, Hannah pointed to a small storage room behind the stall. "There's a couple of sleeping bags in there. It's not much, but you can get some rest tonight. You both look exhausted." Yuri and Haruto were overwhelmed by her generosity. A safe place to sleep felt like a luxury after the past few nights. They thanked Hannah profusely, their voices filled with genuine gratitude. That night, tucked away in the small storage room, they finally got a decent night's sleep. For the first time since they left the school rooftop, a sense of peace settled over them. The next morning, Hannah woke them up with hot tea and some simple breakfast. As they ate, she said, "So, what are your plans? You can't just wander around forever." Yuri and Haruto exchanged uncertain glances. They hadn't really thought beyond the initial escape. Hannah smiled gently. "Look, I know you probably don't want to go back home, and that's okay. But you need to think about what you're going to do. Do you have any skills? Anything you're good at?" Haruto mentioned that he was pretty good at fixing things, and Yuri said she was a fast learner. Hannah listened thoughtfully. "Well," she said, tapping her chin, "I could use some help around the stall. It's not much pay, but it's honest work, and you'd have a place to stay for a while. It would give you some time to figure things out." Yuri and Haruto looked at each other, a spark of hope igniting in their eyes. This was an unexpected opportunity, a chance to catch their breath and plan their next steps. "We'd really appreciate that, Hannah," Yuri said, her voice filled with gratitude. Haruto nodded eagerly. "Yes, thank you so much." And so, Yuri and Haruto found themselves working alongside Hannah at her food stall. They learned how to help with the cooking, serving customers, and keeping the place clean. It was hard work, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of purpose. They also started to meet other people who frequented the stall, some friendly, some a little rough around the edges, but all part of the vibrant tapestry of the city. During their time with Hannah, they experienced some fun moments too. Hannah had a great sense of humor and often told funny stories. They learned some new recipes and even got to try some of the more exotic dishes Hannah experimented with. They started to feel like they were building a small, makeshift family. But they also knew that this couldn't last forever. They were still runaways, and the world outside Hannah's stall was full of unknowns and potential dangers. Chapter 5: A Shadowy Invitation. Weeks turned into a couple of months. Yuri and Haruto settled into a routine at Hana's stall. They became familiar with the regulars, learned the best times to prepare certain dishes, and even started bantering with some of the friendlier customers. They were earning a little money, enough to buy some necessities and put a little aside. For the first time since leaving home, they felt a semblance of stability. One evening, as they were closing up the stall, a man approached them. He was dressed in dark clothes, and his face was partially hidden by the shadow of a baseball cap. He didn't look like one of Hana's usual customers. "Are you Yuri Santo and Haruto Nakamura?" he asked, his voice low and serious. Yuri and Haruto exchanged nervous glances. "Yes," Haruto replied cautiously. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer his question directly. "I've been watching you too. You've shown resourcefulness." He paused, his eyes scanning their faces. "And you seem to be able to handle yourselves." Yuri felt a prickle of unease. "What do you want?" she asked. "My associates and I are looking for individuals with certain skills," the man continued, ignoring her question. "People who aren't afraid of a little, unconventional work." Haruto frowned. "What kind of work?" The man's lips curved into a faint, unsettling smile. "Let's just say it involves tasks that others might shy away from. Tasks that require discretion and a certain level of commitment." He then pulled out a small, intricately folded piece of paper and handed it to Yuri. "If you're interested, be at this address tomorrow night. Midnight. Come alone." He turned and disappeared into the night as quickly and silently as he had appeared. Yuri unfolded the paper. It contained a single address in a part of the city they had never been to, a place known for its dimly lit streets and abandoned warehouses. "What was that all about?" Haruto asked, his voice filled with suspicion. Yuri shivered, a bad feeling creeping over her. "I don't know." It felt creepy. They showed the note to Hana, who looked concerned. "Be careful, you too. That doesn't sound like anything good." Despite Hana's warning, a strange mix of fear and curiosity gnawed at Yuri and Haruto. They had run away seeking something different, and this mysterious invitation felt like a step into the unknown, albeit a potentially dangerous one. The next night, after a long debate, they decided to go. They knew it was risky, but a part of them felt drawn to the mystery, a sense that this could be a turning point in their journey. They promised Hana they would be careful and headed towards the address on the folded paper. The warehouse district was exactly as rumored, dark, deserted, and a little menacing. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and something vaguely metallic. They found the address, a large, dilapidated warehouse with boarded-up windows. Hesitantly, they pushed open a creaking door and stepped inside. The air was cold and musty, and the only light came from a few bare bulbs hanging precariously from the ceiling. In the center of the vast space, a group of figures stood waiting. As Yuri and Haruto approached, one of the figures stepped forward. He was tall and imposing, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce right through them. This had to be the boss. "So, you decided to come," the boss said, his voice smooth but with an underlying edge. He looked at Yuri, his gaze lingering for a moment, making her feel deeply uncomfortable. Then, he turned to the man who had approached them the night before. "Take the boy." Before Haruto could react, two of the figures grabbed his arms and led him away towards a darker part of the warehouse. Yuri's heart pounded in her chest. The boss turned back to Yuri, a smile spreading across his face that didn't reach his eyes. He took a step closer. "Well, now. Let's talk about what you can do for us." Yuri felt a wave of fear wash over her. This felt wrong, dangerous. She instinctively knew she had to get out of here. Chapter 6, A Narrow Escape. Yuri's mind raced. She didn't like the way the boss was looking at her, and the fact that Haruto had been taken away filled her with a cold dread. She knew she had to act fast. The boss took another step closer, his smile widening. "You have a certain fire in your eyes, girl. I like that." He reached out a hand towards her arm. Instinct took over. Yuri recoiled, stepping back sharply. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The boss chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "Feisty. Even better." He took another step, and Yuri knew she couldn't outrun him in this enclosed space. She needed a distraction. Thinking quickly, she scanned her surroundings. Her eyes landed on a stack of old metal barrels nearby. With a sudden burst of energy, she shut the nearest barrel with all her might. It crashed against the others, creating a loud, echoing clang that startled everyone in the warehouse. Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Yuri bolted. She ran towards the direction Haruto had been taken, her heart pounding in her ears. Meanwhile, Haruto was being led through a maze of dusty crates and shadowy corners. He tried to pull away, but the two men holding him were strong. He kept calling out for Yuri, his voice laced with fear. Just as they were about to disappear around a corner, they heard the loud crash. The men holding Haruto paused, looking around in surprise. This gave Haruto the opportunity he needed. He stomped down hard on the foot of the man to his right, who yelped in pain and momentarily loosened his grip. Haruto twisted free. And shoved the other man, sending him stumbling. He didn't wait to see their reaction. He turned and ran back towards the main area, calling out Yuri's name. "Yuri! Yuri, where are you?" He heard a faint reply, "Haruto. Over here." Following the sound of her voice, he saw Yuri near a side exit, trying to pry open a heavy metal door. He ran towards her and together they strained against the door. It was rusted shut. "This way!" Yuri yelled, pointing to a smaller, unsecured door they had come in through. They sprinted towards it, the sounds of angry shouts echoing behind them. They burst out of the warehouse and into the dark night, not stopping to look back. They ran as fast as their legs could carry them, the image of the boss's unsettling smile and the fear for what might have happened fueling their escape. They didn't stop running until they were far away from the warehouse district, their lungs burning and their bodies aching. They found refuge in a quiet, dimly lit alleyway, catching their breath and trying to process what had just happened. "That was terrifying," Yuri gasped, leaning against a brick wall. Haruto nodded, his chest heaving. "Yeah. I'm glad we got out of there." He looked at Yuri, his eyes filled with relief. "Are you okay?" He didn't. Yuri shook her head. "No. He was creepy. But I'm okay." They sat in silence for a few moments, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by a heavy sense of unease. They had trusted a stranger, or rather, a stranger had approached them, and it had almost led to something terrible. "We can't trust anyone," Yuri said, her voice hard. Haruto nodded in agreement. "We have to be more careful." Their brief sense of stability with Hana now felt fragile. The encounter at the warehouse was a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows of the city. They knew they couldn't stay with Hana forever, as that might put her in danger too. They were back on their own, but this time, they were more wary and determined to rely only on each other. Chapter 7, A Fleeting Glimmer of Hope. Huddled in the dimly lit alleyway, Yuri and Haruto tried to make sense of what had just happened. The invitation, the creepy boss, and the feeling of being lured into danger left them shaken. "We can't tell Hana everything," Yuri said quietly. "It would just worry her, and they might come looking for us there." Haruto nodded in agreement. "You're right. We should just say we went for a walk and got lost." The next morning, they returned to Hana's stall, trying to act as normal as possible. Hana looked relieved to see them. "You two were out late." "I was starting to get worried." "Yeah, sorry, Hana," Haruto said, offering a sheepish smile. "We just wanted to see a different part of the city and lost track of time." Hana gave them a knowing look but didn't press further. Life at the food stall continued, but the encounter in the warehouse had cast a shadow over their sense of security. They were more cautious now, always looking over their shoulders. One afternoon, a young woman with bright, curious eyes and a friendly smile stopped by Hannah's stall. Her name was Lynn, and she was a university student who often came for lunch. She noticed that Yuri and Haruto seemed a little down. "Hey, you two okay?" Lynn asked one day as they were serving her. "You seem a bit quiet lately." Yuri and Haruto hesitated, unsure of what to say. Lynn had always been kind to them, though. We had a bit of a scare the other night," Yuri admitted, deciding to keep the details vague. "Some strange people approached us." Lynn's expression turned concerned. "Were you hurt?" "No, we managed to get away," Haruto quickly added. "But it was unsettling." Lynn listened intently, her brow furrowed. "That sounds awful. You know, if you ever need any help or just someone to talk to, I'm usually around the university campus. It's pretty safe there, and there are always people around." She scribbled down her number on a napkin and handed it to Yuri. "Here. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything, okay?" Yuri and Haruto were touched by her kindness. It was a small gesture, but after their recent experience, it felt like a lifeline. "Thank you, Lynn," Yuri said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. "Yeah, thanks a lot," Haruto added. Lynn smiled back. "Take care, you too." As Lynn walked away, Yuri looked at the number on the napkin. It was a small glimmer of hope in their uncertain world. Maybe not everyone was dangerous. Maybe there were still good people. Chapter 8, A Tentative Step Towards Trust. Days passed, and Yuri kept Lynn's number tucked safely in her pocket. The memory of the warehouse still lingered, making them both wary of any unfamiliar faces. However, the feeling of isolation was starting to wear on them. They missed having someone they could truly talk to, someone who wasn't just a fleeting customer at Hannah's stall. One rainy afternoon, business was slow. Hannah was napping in the back, and Yuri and Haruto were wiping down the counter in silence. Do you think we should call Lynn?" Yuri asked hesitantly, breaking the silence. Haruto looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? What if she's not who she seems?" "I know," Yuri said, fiddling with the napkin in her pocket. "But she seemed really nice. And she didn't have to give us her number. Maybe we can just meet her somewhere public, like on the university campus, and see how it goes?" Haruto thought for a moment. They were in a tough spot. They needed to be careful, but they also couldn't live in constant fear and isolation. "Okay," Haruto agreed. "But we stick together, and if anything feels weird, we leave immediately." Yuri nodded, a small sense of relief washing over her. She took out her phone, which she had managed to keep hidden, and carefully typed in Lynn's number. Lynn answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hello?" "Hi Lynn, it's Yuri, from Hannah's stall," Yuri said, a little nervously. "Yuri. Hey. How are you doing?" Lynn sounded genuinely happy to hear from her. Yuri explained that they were doing okay but had been thinking about her offer. She asked if it would be possible to meet her on campus sometime. Lynn was enthusiastic. "Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon? There's a really nice cafe near the library. It's always busy, so it's very safe. I can meet you there around 3 p.m? Yuri and Haruto exchanged a look of cautious optimism. "That sounds great, Lynn." "Thank you." The next day, they made sure to finish their work at Hannah's stall early. They told Hannah they were going to explore a nearby park. With a mix of nervousness and anticipation, they made their way to the university campus. The campus was bustling with students, a vibrant and lively atmosphere that felt different from the gritty streets they had been used to. They found the cafe easily and spotted Lynn waving at them from a table near a window. As they sat down with Lynn, they felt a sense of ease. She was just as friendly and open as they remembered. They talked for a long time, mostly about everyday things, their lives before running away, without giving too many details, their experiences working at the food stall, and Lynn's studies. Lynn didn't pry into their past or their current living situation. She mostly listened and offered a kind ear. By the time they said goodbye, Yuri and Haruto felt a small weight had been lifted. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a genuine friend. Chapter 9, A Glimmer of Possibility. Over the next few weeks, Yuri and Haruto met with Lin several times on the university campus. It became a safe haven for them, a place away from the pressures of their hidden life. Lin never asked too many questions, but she offered genuine support and a listening ear. She even treated them to coffee and small snacks sometimes, a welcome change from their usual budget. One afternoon, as they were studying some flyers on a campus notice board, Lin pointed to one that caught her eye. "Hey, look at this. The university's hosting a volunteer fair next weekend. Lots of local organizations will be there, looking for help." Yuri and Haruto glanced at the flyer. They hadn't really considered volunteering before. "It could be a good way to meet more people and maybe even learn some new skills," Lin suggested. "Plus, it's something positive to do." The idea intrigued them. They were starting to feel a bit restless just working at the food stall. The thought of contributing to something bigger, and meeting new people who weren't part of Hana's usual clientele, was appealing. "Maybe we should check it out," Haruto said to Yuri. Yuri nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it could be interesting." The following weekend, they nervously made their way to the university's gymnasium, where the volunteer fair was being held. The hall was buzzing with activity, filled with booths representing various causes and organizations. People of all ages were chatting and signing up for different roles. Yuri and Haruto felt a little out of place at first, but Lin stayed by their side, introducing them to different representatives. They learned about organizations that helped the homeless, environmental groups, and after-school programs for kids. One booth, in particular, caught Haruto's attention. It was for a community workshop that offered free classes in basic electronics and repair. Haruto had always been curious about how things worked, and the idea of learning more about it excited him. Meanwhile, Yuri was drawn to a booth for a local animal shelter. She had always loved animals and felt a pang of sympathy for those without a home. By the end of the fair, both Yuri and Haruto had signed up to volunteer for one organization each. Haruto would be helping out at the community workshop a couple of afternoons a week, and Yuri would be spending some time at the animal shelter, helping with cleaning and caring for the animals. They left the university that day feeling a sense of hope they hadn't felt in a long time. They were still runaways, still facing an uncertain future, but now they had something more, a connection to the community and a chance to learn and grow. Chapter 10, Finding New Purpose. Yuri started her volunteer work at the animal shelter the following week. At first, she was a little nervous around the animals, some of whom were scared and timid. But with the guidance of the shelter staff, she quickly learned how to approach them gently and care for their needs. She found joy in the simple tasks, cleaning their enclosures, feeding them, and even just spending time petting and comforting the lonely ones. There was a shy, scruffy terrier mix named Lucky who particularly stole her heart. He was wary of people at first, but Yuri's patient and gentle approach slowly won him over. Seeing him wag his tail when she came near filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Through her volunteering, Yuri also met other people who shared her love for animals. There was an older woman named Mrs. Tanaka who had been volunteering at the shelter for years and had a wealth of knowledge about animal care. Yuri enjoyed listening to her stories and learning from her experience. She started to feel like she was part of a small, caring community. Meanwhile, Haruto began his work at the community electronics workshop. The workshop was a small, cluttered space filled with wires, circuit boards, and various tools. The instructor, a friendly, slightly eccentric older man named Mr. Sato, was enthusiastic about sharing his knowledge. Haruto was fascinated by everything he learned. He started with simple tasks like sorting components and organizing tools, but soon Mr. Sato began teaching him the basics of electronics repair. Haruto discovered a natural aptitude for it. He enjoyed taking apart broken devices, figuring out what was wrong, and putting them back together. It gave him a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced before. He also met other volunteers and students at the workshop, people of different ages and backgrounds who shared an interest in technology. He found himself engaging in conversations about circuits, coding, and all sorts of gadgets. For the first time since leaving home, Haruto felt like he had found a hobby, a passion that truly excited him. Volunteering gave both Yuri and Haruto a sense of purpose beyond just surviving. They were contributing to something meaningful, learning new skills, and connecting with people who shared their interests. It was a much-needed positive influence in their lives. However, their past was still a shadow lurking in the background. They knew they couldn't stay in one place forever, and the memory of the warehouse and the unsettling encounter there served as a constant reminder of the dangers that might still be out there. Chapter 11, A Familiar Face in an Unexpected Place. Weeks turned into months, and Yuri and Haruto found a comfortable rhythm in their lives. They worked at Hana's stall, volunteered regularly, and occasionally met up with Lin for coffee or a walk around campus. They were slowly building a new network of friends and acquaintances. One sunny afternoon, Yuri was at the animal shelter, playing with Lucky in the outdoor exercise area. She was laughing as he chased after a bright red ball, his tail wagging furiously. Lost in the moment, she didn't immediately notice a figure standing near the entrance of the shelter. When she finally looked up, her blood ran cold. Standing there, partially obscured by the shadows of the building, was one of the men who had grabbed Haruto at the warehouse. His face was unmistakable, even without the dim lighting of that terrifying night. Yuri's heart pounded in her chest. She quickly scooped up Lucky, holding him close as a wave of fear washed over her. She tried to appear calm, hoping he wouldn't recognize her or connect her to Haruto. The man's eyes scanned the area, and for a moment, Yuri thought he hadn't seen her. But then, his gaze locked onto hers. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed by a hard, calculating look. He started to walk towards her, and Yuri knew she had to act fast. "Excuse me," she called out to a nearby shelter worker, her voice trembling slightly. "Could you watch Lucky for a moment? I think I just saw someone I know, and I need to talk to them." The worker nodded, taking Lucky's leash. Yuri quickly slipped inside the main building, her mind racing. She needed to warn Haruto. She grabbed her phone and frantically texted him, "Haruto, be careful. I just saw one of the guys from the warehouse near the animal shelter. I think they might be looking for us." Her fingers fumbled as she typed, her hands shaking. She knew Haruto was at the electronics workshop that afternoon. She hoped he would get her message in time. Meanwhile, at the workshop, Haruto was engrossed in soldering wires onto a circuit board. His phone was tucked away in his bag, on silent. He was so focused on his task that he didn't hear the quiet footsteps approaching him. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on his shoulder, making him jump. He looked up to see the other man who had held him at the warehouse standing over him, a grim expression on his face. Well, the man sneered. "Look what we found tinkering away." Haruto's blood ran cold. They had found him. Chapter 12, Caught in the Net. Haruto's mind raced. He knew he couldn't fight this man alone. He tried to stay calm, hoping to buy some time. "What do you want?" Haruto asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man chuckled humorlessly. "Our boss wasn't too happy you two ran off like that. He doesn't like loose ends." He gestured towards the door with his head. "Come on. We're going for a little ride." Just then, Haruto's phone vibrated in his bag. He desperately hoped it was Yuri's message. He tried to subtly reach for his bag, but the man noticed. "Trying something, kid?" the man said, his grip tightening on Haruto's shoulder. "Don't even think about it." Meanwhile, Yuri was frantically trying to get a hold of Lin. She explained in a rushed voice what had happened and where Haruto was volunteering. "Lin, you need to go there now. Warn Haruto." Tell him those dangerous people found him. Lynn, though shocked, didn't hesitate. I'm on my way, she said, her voice filled with urgency. But Lynn was still on campus, and the electronics workshop was a bit of a distance away. Time was running out for Haruto. The man started to pull Haruto towards the exit of the workshop. Mr. Sato, the instructor, looked up, concerned. Hey! What's going on here? Just taking this young man for a quick chat, the man said, his tone deceptively casual. Haruto tried to pull away. I don't know this guy. Help, he called out to Mr. Sato and the other people in the workshop. The man's grip tightened even more. He's just causing trouble. We'll be right back. He started dragging Haruto towards the door. Suddenly, another voice cut through the air. Let him go. It was Yuri, who had run all the way from the animal shelter. She burst into the workshop, her face flushed and her eyes blazing. The man holding Haruto looked surprised. Well, look who it is. The little bird flew back to the cage. He smirked. Looks like we found both of you. Two more figures appeared in the doorway behind him, blocking the exit. Yuri and Haruto were trapped. Mr. Sato and the others in the workshop looked confused and a little scared. They didn't know what was happening. Leave us alone. Yuri yelled, her voice trembling but defiant. We didn't do anything to you. Our boss thinks otherwise, one of the newcomers said, stepping closer. You know too much. Chapter 13, A Desperate Plea and an Unexpected Ally. Yuri and Haruto stood back to back, their hearts pounding in unison. They were outnumbered and cornered. The men from the warehouse looked menacing, their intentions clear. What do you want from us? Haruto demanded, trying to sound braver than he felt. Like my friend said, the boss isn't happy, the first man replied, taking a step closer. You saw things you shouldn't have. Now you have to pay the price. Just as they seemed about to grab them, Mr. Sato, the electronics workshop instructor, stepped forward, looking surprisingly stern. Hold on a minute. What's going on here? You can't just come in here and take people. The men scoffed. Stay out of this, old man. This is none of your business. It is my business when you're causing trouble in my workshop. Mr. Sato retorted, his voice surprisingly firm. He might have looked unassuming, but there was a steel in his eyes that Yuri hadn't noticed before. While this unexpected intervention gave Yuri and Haruto a brief pause, they knew it wouldn't last. These men looked serious. Suddenly, the door burst open again, and Lynn rushed in, her face pale with worry. Haruto. Yuri. Are you okay? She looked at the menacing figures with wide, frightened eyes. Lynn. You shouldn't have come here. Yuri exclaimed. I couldn't just leave you, Lynn said, her voice trembling slightly but filled with determination. The first man smirked. Well, look at this. The more the merrier. He gestured to his companions. Grab them all. Just as the men moved forward, Mr. Sato did something completely unexpected. He reached under his workbench and pulled out a long, metal pipe. He swung it with surprising speed, hitting one of the men in the leg. The man yelped and stumbled backward. Run! Mr. Sato yelled at Yuri and Haruto, his voice surprisingly strong. Get out of here. I'll try to hold them off. Yuri and Haruto didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed Lynn's hands and bolted towards the back of the workshop, hoping there was another way out. They ran through a storage room filled with old equipment and found a small, dusty back door. Haruto fumbled with the latch, his hands shaking, and finally managed to get it open. They burst out into a narrow alleyway, the sounds of shouting and scuffling coming from the workshop behind them. They didn't stop running until they were far away, their lungs burning and their hearts pounding with fear and gratitude for Mr. Sato's unexpected bravery. They found themselves in a busy market area, the crowds providing some cover. They ducked into a narrow side street, trying to catch their breath and figure out what to do next. We need to get out of here, Yuri said, her voice urgent. They know where we work and where Haruto volunteers. They'll keep looking. But where do we go? Haruto asked, his face etched with worry. Lin, though still shaken, spoke up. Maybe we should go to the police? Yuri and Haruto exchanged hesitant glances. They had been living outside the system for so long, the idea of involving the authorities felt daunting and potentially risky. But they were running out of options. Chapter 14, A Difficult Decision. The idea of going to the police hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. Yuri and Haruto had been living on the fringes, trying to avoid any official attention. Trusting the authorities felt like a huge leap of faith, especially after their experience with the shadowy group. I don't know. Yuri said hesitantly. What if they don't believe us? What if these people have connections? But what else can we do? Lin argued, her voice trembling slightly. They attacked you. They threatened you. That's against the law. Maybe the police can help. Haruto was torn. He didn't like the idea of getting the police involved, but he also didn't see another way out of this. These people were clearly dangerous and wouldn't just give up. Mr. Sato. Haruto said, his voice filled with concern. They might go after him for helping us. That thought solidified their decision. They couldn't just run and leave Mr. Sato to face the consequences. Okay, Yuri said, taking a deep breath. We'll go to the police. But we stick together, and we tell them everything. Lin nodded in agreement, relief washing over her face. I'll go with you. They found a nearby police station and, with a mix of fear and determination, walked inside. The brightly lit lobby and the uniformed officers felt both intimidating and reassuring. They approached the front desk and explained that they needed to report a crime. The officer on duty listened carefully, his expression turning serious as they recounted their story, the initial encounter at the warehouse, the unsettling invitation, and the attack at the electronics workshop. They even mentioned seeing the man near the animal shelter. It was scary to tell everything, to expose their lives as runaways. But Lin's presence and her clear, articulate way of explaining things helped them feel a little more confident. The officer took down their statements, asking for details and descriptions. He assured them that they would take their report seriously and investigate. He also expressed concern for Mr. Sato's safety and promised to send officers to the workshop. Leaving the police station, Yuri and Haruto felt a mix of relief and anxiety. They had taken a big step, putting their trust in the authorities. Now, all they could do was hope that it was the right decision. Chapter 15, Waiting and Worrying. The days that followed their visit to the police station were filled with a tense uncertainty. The police officers they spoke with had been polite and professional, promising to look into their claims. They took down all the information Yuri and Haruto could provide about the men from the warehouse and the unsettling boss. However, investigations take time, and Yuri and Haruto found themselves in a state of anxious waiting. They continued to work at Hana's stall, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the fear of being found again was always lurking in the back of their minds. Mr. Sato was thankfully unharmed. The police had visited the workshop and taken his statement. He was shaken but incredibly relieved that Yuri and Haruto had managed to escape. He even called them to make sure they were okay, his gruff voice filled with genuine concern. Lin remained a steadfast friend, checking in on them regularly and offering support. She was impressed by their bravery in going to the police and reassured them that they had done the right thing. Despite the support, Yuri and Haruto couldn't shake the feeling of being vulnerable. They knew the people they had encountered were dangerous and likely wouldn't give up easily. They started being extra cautious, always aware of their surroundings. One evening, as they were walking back to Hana's after a late shift, they noticed a familiar figure lurking in the shadows across the street. It was one of the men from the warehouse. He didn't approach them, but the menacing look on his face was unmistakable. Fear shot through Yuri and Haruto. They quickly ducked into a brightly lit convenience store, pretending to browse the shelves until they were sure the man was gone. The encounter left them deeply shaken. The police investigation might be underway, but these people were still out there, watching them. "We can't stay here," Haruto said, his voice low and urgent. "They know where Hana's stall is. They know our routines." Yuri nodded, her mind racing. They had found a small sense of stability, but it had been shattered once again. They were back to being on the run, but this time, they had Lin and Mr. Sato to worry about too. Their actions had potentially put their newfound friends in danger. "We need to disappear," Yuri said, her voice filled with a grim determination. "We need to find a place where they won't look for us." But where could they go? They had limited resources and no real plan. The city, which had once held a glimmer of possibility, now felt like a dangerous maze. Chapter 16, Vanishing Act. The realization that they were still being watched lit a fire under Yuri and Haruto. They knew they couldn't stay at Hana's stall any longer without putting her at risk. That night, after Hana had gone to sleep, they quietly packed their few belongings. It was heartbreaking to leave the small sense of security Hana had provided, but they knew it was necessary. They left a note for Hana, explaining that they had to go but that they were okay and would never forget her kindness. It was a difficult goodbye, filled with unspoken gratitude and a heavy sense of guilt. They also knew they couldn't contact Lin or Mr. Sato directly, as that might also put them in danger. It felt awful to cut off these budding friendships, but for now, it seemed like the only way to protect everyone. Under the cover of darkness, Yuri and Haruto slipped away from Hana's stall and headed towards the sprawling network of train lines that crisscrossed the city. They used the last of their money to buy tickets to a station far outside their usual area, hoping to lose anyone who might be tracking them. The train ride was long and filled with anxiety. Every time the doors opened at a station, they held their breath, worried that their pursuers might be waiting. They tried to blend in with the other late-night travelers, looking tired and inconspicuous. When they finally arrived at their destination, it was to a completely unfamiliar part of the city. The streets were different, the buildings looked different, and the atmosphere felt foreign. It was both scary and liberating to be in a place where no one knew them and no one was looking for them, at least, they hoped no one was looking for them here. They spent the next few days wandering, trying to find a new place to stay and a way to earn some money. They slept in parks during the day and sought shelter in train station waiting rooms at night, always keeping a watchful eye out for any familiar faces. Finding work was difficult without any connections or a permanent address. They tried to pick up odd jobs, helping vendors at the market, doing small cleaning tasks, earning just enough for cheap meals. It was a harsh and lonely existence. They missed Hana's warmth, Lin's friendship, and even the routine of the food stall and the volunteer work. But they knew they had to keep moving, keep hiding, until they felt safe again. Despite the difficulties, their bond grew stronger. They relied on each other completely, sharing their fears and hopes, and drawing strength from their shared experience. They were learning to survive on their own, navigating the underbelly of the city, and becoming more street-smart with each passing day. Chapter 18, Whispers of the Underground. Weeks turned into a couple of months at Mrs. Aoki's internet cafe. They settled into a routine of cleaning, running errands, and trying to stay invisible. Their interactions with Kenji and Mr. Tanaka remained cautious but comforting, like small islands of peace in their uncertain sea. One late night, Kenji was helping Haruto troubleshoot a particularly stubborn computer issue. As they were working, Kenji mentioned a flyer he had seen posted near the university about a secret party happening that weekend. "It's supposed to be pretty big," Kenji said, his eyes gleaming with a hint of excitement. "Underground scene, you know? Lots of music and people." Haruto wasn't usually one for parties, especially after everything they had been through. He glanced at Yuri, who was wiping down tables nearby. "I don't know, Kenji," Haruto said hesitantly. "We're not really the party type." "Come on," Kenji urged. "It could be fun. A chance to forget about everything for a night." It's supposed to be in an old warehouse district, kind of cool and edgy. Yuri had been listening in. A part of her longed for a sense of normalcy, a chance to just be a regular teenager for a little while. But the thought of being in a large crowd, where anyone could recognize them, also made her nervous. Maybe, Yuri said slowly, considering it. Maybe it would be okay, just for a little while. Haruto looked at Yuri, seeing a flicker of something almost like hope in her eyes. He knew she had been carrying a lot of weight. Okay, Haruto agreed. But we stick together, and if anything feels off, we leave. Kenji grinned. Awesome. I'll text you the details. It's going to be epic. As the weekend approached, Yuri and Haruto felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The idea of going to a party felt both exciting and a little scary. It was a step back into the world, but also a potential risk. When the night of the party arrived, they followed Kenji's directions to a dimly lit warehouse district that looked eerily similar to the place where they had the bad encounter. A wave of unease washed over Yuri, but she pushed it down, wanting to experience something normal for once. The warehouse was pulsing with music and lights. People were dancing, talking, and laughing. It was a chaotic and vibrant scene, a world away from the quiet solitude they had been living in. For a while, they managed to relax and even have some fun, dancing and soaking in the energy of the crowd. Kenji introduced them to some of his friends, who were friendly and welcoming. For a fleeting moment, Yuri and Haruto felt like they could almost forget about their troubles. But as the night wore on, a sense of unease began to creep back in. The sheer number of people made Yuri feel exposed, and she kept scanning the crowd, half expecting to see a familiar, unwelcome face. Chapter 19, A Shadow in the Crowd. The hours drifted by in a haze of music and movement. Yuri and Haruto stayed close to each other, occasionally losing Kenji in the throng but always finding their way back. For a while, Yuri managed to push down her anxiety and even laugh at some of Kenji's goofy dance moves. Haruto seemed a little more reserved but was definitely enjoying the chance to just be a regular teenager for a night. As the party wore on, the crowd seemed to get denser, the music louder. Yuri excused herself to grab a drink, weaving through the packed bodies. As she reached the makeshift bar, she caught a glimpse of someone across the room that made her freeze. It was a fleeting image, partially obscured by the flashing lights and dancing figures, but there was something familiar about the way the person stood, the set of their shoulders. It looked like one of the men from the warehouse, the one who had grabbed Haruto at the electronics workshop. Her heart pounded in her chest. She blinked, trying to get a clearer view, but the person had disappeared back into the crowd. Was it him? Or am I just being paranoid? She thought, her earlier sense of fun completely gone. She quickly found Haruto and Kenji. Guys, she said, her voice urgent, I think I just saw someone I don't want to see. Haruto's eyes widened with alarm. What? Who? I'm not sure, but it looked like one of the men from the warehouse, Yuri whispered, her gaze darting around the room. We need to be careful. Kenji looked concerned. Are you sure? This place is pretty crowded. I don't know for sure, Yuri admitted, but I have a bad feeling. Just then, the music suddenly cut out, replaced by a loud screech from the speakers. A voice, distorted and amplified, cut through the sudden silence. Attention everyone, the voice boomed. This party's about to get a whole lot more exciting. A hush fell over the crowd, a sense of unease rippling through the warehouse. People exchanged nervous glances. We have a little surprise for you all, the voice continued, a sinister edge creeping in. Something that will really make this a night to remember. Yuri and Haruto looked at each other, a cold dread settling in their stomachs. This didn't sound good at all. Chapter 20, The Chilling Revelation. A wave of nervous murmuring rippled through the crowd. People were looking around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. The flashing lights continued, adding to the sense of disorientation. Then, a figure stepped into a raised area overlooking the main floor. The dim lighting made it hard to see their face clearly, but there was something menacing about their posture. They held a small device in their hand. For those of you who don't know, the voice continued, now laced with a chilling calmness, tonight, you're all part of something, much bigger than just a party. Yuri's heart pounded in her chest. This felt wrong, horribly wrong. She grabbed Haruto's arm tightly. We need to get out of here, she whispered urgently. But before they could move, the figure raised the device in their hand. Let's just say this little gadget here is going to make sure none of you forget this night. A cruel smile flickered across their lips in the strobe lights. Because in a few minutes, boom. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Everyone gasped. The realization hit like a physical blow, this wasn't just a threat. This was real. A bomb, someone screamed. Panic erupted again, 10 times worse than before. People were shoving and scrambling, desperate to find an exit. Yuri and Haruto knew they had to act fast. They couldn't just run, there were so many people trapped in the warehouse. We have to stop them. Haruto yelled over the rising chaos, his eyes determined. They tried to move towards the raised area where the figure with the device was standing, but the panicked crowd was a surging wave of bodies, making it almost impossible to move. Suddenly, Yuri spotted the person she had seen earlier, the man from the warehouse. He was moving purposefully through the crowd, heading towards the same raised area. It clicked in Yuri's mind, they were involved in this. Haruto. It's them. The people from before, she shouted, pointing. Their past had caught up to them in the worst possible way, throwing them into the middle of a deadly situation. Now, not only were they in danger, but so was everyone else at the party. Chapter 21, A Desperate Fight. The bomber, now clearly visible in the flashing lights, was fiddling with the device, a look of manic determination on their face. The crowd surged around them, a mix of terror and confusion. We have to get up there. Haruto yelled to Yuri, grabbing her hand. They started pushing their way through the panicked mass of people, trying to get closer to the raised platform. It was a brutal struggle. People were screaming and shoving, their only instinct to escape. Yuri and Haruto had to fight against the flow, their urgency fueled by the knowledge that every second counted. Suddenly, the man Yuri had spotted earlier intercepted them. He grabbed Haruto, trying to pull him back. Not so fast, runaways, he snarled. Yuri reacted instantly, kicking out and hitting the man in the leg. He stumbled, momentarily losing his grip, and Haruto wrenched himself free. Go on. Haruto yelled to Yuri. I'll deal with him. Yuri nodded, her heart pounding, and continued to fight her way towards the platform. She could see the bomber was still focused on the device, seemingly oblivious to the chaos they had unleashed. Reaching the base of the platform, Yuri started to climb, grabbing onto whatever she could find for purchase. Below, she could see Haruto locked in a fierce struggle with the man. It was a desperate, messy fight, bodies colliding in the flashing lights. Finally, Yuri reached the platform. The bomber turned, surprised to see her. They lunged at her with the device, but Yuri reacted quickly, dodging the attack and grabbing their arm. A fierce struggle ensued on the small platform. Yuri was smaller, but she was fueled by adrenaline and a fierce determination to protect everyone. They wrestled for control of the device, each straining with all their might. Below, Haruto managed to knock the man down, but another figure emerged from the crowd, joining the fight against him. Yuri knew they were outnumbered and running out of time. During the struggle on the platform, the device slipped from the bomber's grasp and went flying. It spun through the air, a dark shape against the flashing lights, and landed dangerously close to Yuri. Yuri! Haruto yelled, seeing the danger. Before Yuri could even turn, Haruto lunged forward, throwing himself on top of her to shield her from the blast. A deafening explosion ripped through the warehouse. The platform shook violently, and Yuri was thrown backward. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning. When the dust settled slightly, Yuri looked down in horror. Haruto was lying motionless on top of her. Chapter 22, A Love Unspoken, A Life Lost. The weight of Haruto's body pressed down on Yuri, the silence after the explosion deafening in her ears. A high-pitched ringing filled the space where the music and screams had been moments before. Slowly, she pushed him off, her hands trembling as they touched his bloodied form. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision as she saw the extent of his injuries. His breathing was shallow, ragged gasps that tore at her heart. A sob escaped her lips, a raw sound of pure anguish. "Haruto. No. Please, no," she cried, cradling his head in her lap. Her hands shook as she tried to find a pulse, but there was only a faint, weak flutter. The chaos around them seemed to fade away. The flashing lights, the panicked shouts, the smell of smoke, everything receded as Yuri focused solely on Haruto. The confession she had held back for so long now burst forth in a torrent of grief. "Haruto. I love you," she choked out, her voice thick with tears. "I should have told you. I should have said it sooner." His eyes flickered open, just for a moment. He looked at her, his gaze filled with pain, but also a flicker of something else, understanding? Peace? He reached up a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against her cheek. "Yuri," he whispered, his voice barely audible, like a fading echo. More tears streamed down Yuri's face as she leaned closer, her heart shattering into a million pieces. "Don't leave me, Haruto. Please, stay with me." A faint, sad smile touched his lips, and then his eyes closed again. His hand, still resting on her cheek, went limp. The faint flutter of his pulse was gone. Yuri held him close, her body racked with sobs. The love she had finally found, the connection that had given her a reason to keep going, had been snatched away in a brutal, selfless act. The world around her felt empty and meaningless once more, the darkness she had felt on the Chapter 23, A World Unseen. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles pierced through the smoke, painting the scene in stark reds and blues. The air was thick with the smell of burning and the sounds of shouting, but Yuri remained locked in her own silent world of grief. She cradled Haruto's head, her tears falling onto his still face, oblivious to the chaos around her. Someone gently touched her shoulder, but she flinched, recoiling as if burned. It was Kenji, his face pale and streaked with tears. He looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and concern, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Yuri, we need to move," he said softly. "The paramedics, they need to help him." Yuri stared at him, uncomprehending. His words were just sounds, meaningless against the crushing weight of her loss. She didn't want to move. Moving meant acknowledging that Haruto was really gone, and she couldn't bear to face that reality. Kenji, understanding her state, gently but firmly helped her to her feet. Her legs felt like lead, and she stumbled, barely able to stand. The world seemed to spin around her, a dizzying mix of flashing lights and blurred faces. As they moved away from Haruto's body, Yuri's gaze remained fixed on him, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. It was as if a part of her was still hoping this was a nightmare, a terrible dream from which she would soon wake up. Paramedics approached, their faces grim. They knelt beside Haruto, their movements efficient and professional, but Yuri couldn't watch. She turned away, burying her face in Kenji's shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. The policewoman who had spoken to them earlier approached, her voice calm and gentle. She asked Yuri questions, but Yuri could barely answer. Her words were disjointed, her thoughts fragmented. She could only repeat Haruto's name over and over again. Kenji answered for her as much as he could, his own voice thick with emotion. He explained what they had seen, the fight, the explosion, Haruto's sacrifice. The policewoman listened patiently, her expression filled with sympathy. She assured Yuri that they would do everything they could to find the bomber and bring them to justice. But her words offered little comfort. Justice felt meaningless in the face of such a devastating loss. As the night wore on, Yuri remained in a daze, moving through the motions like a puppet. She was aware of Kenji's presence beside her, a steady anchor in the storm of her grief, but she felt utterly alone. Haruto was gone, and with him, a part of her had died too. Chapter 24, Echoes of Remembrance. The days that followed the explosion were a blur of grief and confusion for Yuri. She moved through the world like a ghost, haunted by the memory of Haruto's sacrifice. The police investigation continued, but the answers she sought felt distant and irrelevant. Kenji stayed by her side, a quiet and unwavering presence. He didn't try to force her to talk or offer empty platitudes. He simply was there, providing a silent anchor in her storm of emotions. He helped her with the practicalities, dealing with the police, making arrangements. The weight of Haruto's loss was immense, but amidst the darkness, small glimmers of support began to emerge. Mrs. Aoki, the internet cafe owner, was deeply saddened by what had happened. She offered Yuri a place to stay for as long as she needed, a safe haven where she could grieve in peace. Mr. Tanaka, the elderly artist from the park, also reached out. He shared stories of loss and resilience, reminding Yuri that even in the deepest sorrow, there was still the possibility of finding beauty and meaning in life. Slowly, tentatively, Yuri began to piece together the fragments of her shattered world. She started writing again, pouring her grief and memories into her stories. It was a painful process, but it also became a way to honor Haruto's memory, to keep his spirit alive in her words. She wrote about their rooftop promise, their adventures at Hana's stall, their quiet moments of friendship, and his final act of selfless love. Through her writing, she found a way to express the inexpressible, to give voice to the love she had never fully confessed while Haruto was alive. The city, once a place of fear and uncertainty, began to take on a new meaning. It held the echoes of their shared experiences, the bittersweet memories of their time together. Yuri knew she couldn't stay in the past, but she also knew she would never forget. Chapter 25, A New Dawn. Months passed, and the sharpness of Yuri's grief slowly began to soften, replaced by a quiet ache of remembrance. She continued to write, her stories becoming more hopeful, more focused on the resilience of the human spirit. She found herself drawn back to the places she and Haruto had shared, the park with the koi pond, the bustling market where they had worked, even the university campus where she had met Lin. Each place held a memory, a whisper of his presence. One day, she decided to visit Hana's food stall. Hana was overjoyed to see her, her eyes filled with tears of both sadness and relief. They shared stories and memories, laughing and crying together. Yuri realized that even in loss, there was still the enduring power of human connection. Kenji remained a steadfast friend, his support unwavering. He encouraged Yuri to share her writing, and she eventually found the courage to submit her stories to a small literary magazine. To her surprise and delight, they were accepted. Seeing her words in print, read by others, gave Yuri a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She knew that Haruto would have been proud of her. The ending of Yuri and Haruto's story isn't about erasing the pain or forgetting the past. It's about acknowledging the grief, honoring the memory of those we've lost, and finding the strength to move forward with hope and resilience. Yuri's journey is one of loss, but also of love, friendship, and the enduring power of the human spirit to find light even in the darkest of times. The end. Author note. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to read Yuri and Haruto's story in Tokyo Twilight Escape. These characters and their journey have been really special to create. This story explores some tough feelings, like loneliness and the desire to find your place in the world. It also shows how even in dark times, kindness and connection can make a real difference. I hope you found something in Yuri and Haruto's escape that resonated with you. Remember that even when things feel overwhelming, there's always a possibility for a new path and the chance to find people who understand you. Thank you for reading.